My name is Oliver Mauroner, and in this video, I would like to talk about business models, what a business model is, how does it work. I would also like to talk about business model innovation, and I would like to take a look at the so-called business model canvas, which is a tool to create and to further develop business models. So let's start with an example, and let's look at the business model of Mercedes-Benz, the car manufacturer. So Mercedes, in this case, represents the manufacturing company, so that it manufactures its own products and it sells these products to the customers, to the end consumers. And how does the business model work in a nutshell? Very simplified. So what they do is they develop and they produce cars or products in general at specific costs, and they sell them for, hopefully a higher amount of money to the final customers. So it's products versus payment. This is the very, very simplified case of a business model. It works if the products are good and if the customers, if they perceive the value and they are willing to pay the price. But of course, what is also obvious that there are many other firms and many other services where this very simple business model does not work. So one example, of course, is Google. It is clear that most of the users of this search engine, they do not pay any money for this service. So however, it's also clear that the search engine cannot be created for free. So the infrastructure, the servers, the staff, the administration, and all this creates costs, and these costs somehow they must be covered. So we need other parties or other mechanisms or other stakeholders, somehow third parties, which are involved in this business model to make it work. So this could be, for example, advertisers. This could be other companies to pay for aggregated data or any kind of commission service and so on. So let's look at some definitions or some explanations of what a business model is. So it could be also described as a story, the story of how a company works. It should answer some of the relevant questions. So the question is, what is really the so-called underlying economic logic of a company? How can this value be created and how can it be delivered to the customers? How can all the costs be covered and so on? It also needs to answer the question, who is really appreciating that value and who is really then the customer? And of course, the very, very simple, but very relevant question also, how does a company make any money? So it describes the organization, the delivery, the capture of this value. So we could look at this, or to sum up somehow. So we could look at this explanation that a business model is a description of what the company does. It includes all the relevant aspects, such as what is the purpose of the firm, what is the business process, who are the targeted customers, what is the offering, meaning the products or the services, what's the strategy, the infrastructure, the organizational structure, also the sourcing and the supply chain, the trading practices, the operational processes, the policies, also including the corporate culture. So it really describes how a company works. So if once more we look at this Google case, we can see that the business model is not something stable or static, which must be taken for granted. Yeah, so it also can be subject to change, to new ideas, to new ways of earning money, and this in a nutshell, it can be the subject to innovation, and this is what we then call business model innovation. So this is currently a very hot topic: business models in general and business models innovation in specific. So, for example, Oliver Gassmann from the University in St. Gallen in Switzerland, and with his colleagues, they did a lot of research in this field. And one fundamental thesis of them is that business model innovation provides additional value and additional innovation potential on top of the simple, it's not simple, but on top of the product innovation or of the technology or process innovation. Yeah, so business model innovation on top of that can create real value. So what they also did is they published many articles and many books, and for example, also this business model navigator. Yeah, so the authors, what they claimed is that we're currently in this age of business model innovation, and that many new firms and many new services, they are simply based on business model innovation and not so much on technology or product innovation. What their research also showed is that most of the business model innovations are based on the same old and somehow also recurring patterns. Yeah, so in the first edition of that book, Gassmann and his colleagues, they named 55 ideal type business models. Yeah, so and among them, for example, there are very prominent ones like the razor and blade business model or the franchise business model or many others. And the basic idea is that these models, they can be used as templates or as inspirations in very different sectors and with very different products and different services. So let's have a very quick look at three of those ideal type or standard type business models, which are the razor and blades business model, the cutting out a middleman business model, and the pay what you want business model. So one of the most prominent business models or ideal type, standard type business models, which shows also a good history, is the so-called razor and blade business model. How does it work? Well, we have two kinds of products or parts of the entire service or product, and they are connected also with each other, which is very important. So one part is a product with a very good price performance ratio, such as a razor tool or such as a mobile phone device or a computer printer or a digital camera or also an Adobe document reader. And the other part is a product or a service with a very good margin to the manufacturing company. Yeah, and the secret is that the customers, they are somehow bound by the first part of this product to buy the second part of it. Yeah, so if I have a razor from a certain company, I also need to buy the blades of that same company. If I have an espresso coffee machine, I also need to buy the quite expensive Nespresso capsulas. So important is the ties between A and B, between the two parts of the company, of the product, and that these ties, they cannot easily be broken by, for example, by some no-name products or by some third parties. Another ideal type business model is called cutting out the middleman. So this model is very useful when dealing with long supply chains where the product or the end product becomes a little more expensive with each step in this supply chain. So if we are able to reduce the steps or even to eliminate all the intermediate steps and so on, then the product can be sold by a better price, much cheaper, or the margin at the end can be much higher. So this model, for example, works for tea, but also for other retail circumstances. And a third type is called the pay what you want business model. In this case, the price is not fixed. It's not a fixed set price, but the customer can decide how much he or she is willing to pay. So this can make it very attractive to the customer because the customer can decide how much is the product worth for me, how much am I willing to pay. So they are asked to pay what they feel the product or service is worth for them. And in most cases, this amount is greater than zero because the customers, they feel, well, this provides a value, it's worth something. So this, of course, this model works not for everything, but it works quite well for nonprofit organizations, for cultural businesses, for music and film industry, for social businesses, all kinds of businesses or services where we have an emotional connection between the producer and the customer, so that the customers become like fans of the producer or of the service provider. And there are many more of these standard types business models. And one very relevant aspect is then the question, of course, if these models can replace or somehow enrich or change the existing traditional business models. So where we simply have this products versus payment thing. So if Mercedes can sell or make money or make a business with, for example, a pay what you want business model or a Razor&Blades business model and so on. This is where business model innovation then comes into the game. So the business models and business model innovation in general can be used for business development, can be used for new ideas, the design of new firms, but also, let's say, the somehow revision of already existing firms and their existing and traditional strategies. So on the one side, it's about new firms, turning them into a business, so like Spotify, the music streaming service. But of course, it also plays a role for established companies with well-established and traditional products at existing markets. So in this case, for example, Hilti, the supplier of construction machinery and tools, is an example. So they have changed their model from just selling the products into an integrated and very rich service, also based on data and artificial intelligence and so on. So let's now have a look at how business models can be created and can be also visualized in a very, very easy way. So the business model canvas is a tool to do so. It's a very, very prominent tool and also term in the startup consulting world, in the startup world in general. But also in business and consultancy work, this term is very often used, also in the traditional world. But what is it? What is it all about? Canvas stands for a white sheet of paper, basically. Yeah. So, but it also provides a structure with these 9 fields, what we see here. So this tool can be used to better understand and to analyze and to visualize the structure of a business idea, of a new one, or also of an already existing one. Yeah. So the tool was developed by the Swiss researcher Alexander Osterwalder as part of his doctoral thesis, and initially published in 2010 in this very famous book, Business Model Generator, together with Yves Pigneur. And in the same year, they also founded the Strategizer, which is a management consultancy firm, a small team, which also provides training and uses this tool, among many other things. So the business model canvas, what it is, it's a visual chart with elements describing what a firm's or what a product's value proposition is. Yeah, what is its infrastructure, who are the customers, the finances. It assists firms and founders in somehow aligning their activities and illustrating also potential trade-offs also. Yeah, so it can be seen as a template, a strategic management template, a lean startup template, which can be used to document and to understand existing business models and also to develop new business models. So as I said, it was initially published in 2010, but it's still relevant, and it's also still relevant, subject to academic research. Yeah, so for example, in 2020, this article, what we see at one side, it's about displaying the model for a specific industry, the creative industry. Yeah, so this has been done by investigating Australian visual artists, for example, with the goal to adapt the business model canvas, the very traditional one, to build a new creative business model canvas. Other studies, for example, they look at specific applications of the business model canvas. In this article from 2018, for example, it looks at how small companies, how small firms in Indonesia, for example, how they use and how they can adopt the business model to their circumstances to get a strategic advantage. And there are many, many other studies on that. But let's look at the model itself and the different fields, and let's go through the different fields. Let's take a quick look. Starting point is the value proposition. Yeah, so here relevant questions are: what is really the value I can create to the customer? What is a problem which is relevant to the customer, and how can I solve this problem? Another starting point is the customer segments itself. Yeah, so who are my customers? Can I, let's say, build some different categories? Can I, let's say, or am I addressing the mass market or some niches of the entire market? Or am I also talking about two-sided or multi-sided platforms, like we have in the example of Google, for instance? Then a relevant aspect is, how can I reach the customers in somehow in an emotional way? How can I build a relationship with the customers? How can I create a community and so on? And of course, the question is, how can my products and how can my services be transferred or transported to the customers? Am I talking about a delivery service? Do I have physical stores or online stores? How is the purchasing and the delivery process? How does that work? And of course, it's about the money. Yeah, so it's about the so-called revenue streams. Yeah, so for what is the customer really willing to pay any money? Or is the customer paying any money? Or do I get revenues from third parties, for instance? Or is it a fixed pricing or not? Is it money by subscription service, by some kind of commission service, brokerage service, and so on? So how do I, as a company, how do I get any money? So in this side, this side we have, let's say these fields, we have the market side of the business model canvas. If we look now at the other categories or at the other fields, they are more about, let's say, the value creation side. What's the infrastructure? What are the processes behind it? So for example, what are my key activities? What do I have to do? What kind of activities do I have to perform? And of course, what kind of resources do I need? Do I need to have a physical infrastructure? Do I need to have physical resources, financial resources, intellectual property rights, facilities, and so on? And of course, it's not always necessary that I own everything, so that I am only relying on my individual resources, but I can also cooperate with others, with partners. So for example, this Spotify, the streaming platform, of course, they cooperate with the music labels, or for example, with a single individual artists. So they are partners in this entire business model. And then finally, we have the cost structure as a relevant category. So all those activities, resources, and also the partnership, they create the costs. So what are the costs? Or do I have high fixed costs, or do I have variable costs? Can I also benefit from the economies of scale, for example, if I do things more often, like it's oftentimes in the digital world, in the digital platforms the case. So where I have shrinking variable costs. So here again, we see the model, the simplified version of that model, and we can run through this application of the model once more with the single steps. So the value proposition and the customer segment, they are the starting points. So here everything starts. What does the customer want, and am I able to offer this value to the customer? Then I can look at the relationships. How can I establish and build relationships? Then I can look at the channels. How can I provide the customer with my service and my product? And of course, I can think of how can I earn money? Is it from the customer itself, or is it from a third party? And then I can look at the infrastructure. How is that value created? By myself, my own activities, my own resources, or by the partners? And what kind of costs are created by all those activities, by all that infrastructure? And then, of course, and this would then be, let's say, in the best case, is that the cost structure is a little bit lower than my revenue streams, so that I have a kind of a margin with this business model, so which is somehow is needed for having a long-term working business model. So that's the business model canvas in a nutshell. There are many examples and many other good videos on how to use this template and what to consider when using it. A very prominent example is, of course, the Nespresso business model. So where we have this value proposition for example, that customers, they can get the experience of a real and good tasting Italian espresso at their own home. Yeah, yeah, that's the value proposition in this case. Of course, Nespresso is a lifestyle product. It's establishes good relationship with their customers due to the clubs and so on. So the whole structure of this business model canvas is quite complex with all those 9 fields. It also takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to go through it. Yeah? So if you really want to do that in depth. And also Osterwalder and also many others, they recognize that the focus should lay on the customer needs and on the question how to satisfy them by its own services, by its own value propositions. So Osterwalder then created another tool, which is called the value proposition canvas. It was also published in a book a few years later in 2014, the value proposition design. And it really focuses on these 2 parts, on the value proposition, what do I create, and on the customers, what are the customers' needs, the so-called customer jobs to be done. The value proposition looks like that. As I said, it focuses on the customer needs at the one hand, customer jobs. What are the jobs? What is a customer looking for? Which jobs and which services he wants to be done? What are also problems that does the customer have? And what are also his wishes? What does he really want? And then we can look at the other side. What can I as a company do and provide to help the customers to do these jobs in the right way? How can I reduce the pain of the customer, and how can I create any kind of positive gains for the customer? So the value proposition canvas is a very good starting point for identifying a product or a service idea. And in the next steps, it can be elaborated more in detail with the business model canvas. So thanks for your attention and a lot of fun with creating your own business models.